We are live on the show, and happy Valentine's Day to all of you. It is Valentine's Day today, so I thought I'd bring a little bit of love to all of you by talking about a topic which I receive so much love at the moment, Bitcoin SV. And I wanted to invite onto the show today Kevin Pham. He is, of course, very well known in the crypto Twitter sphere. He writes prolifically about everything that is Bitcoin, and what fascinated me was to watch him go from a maximalist and then to switch sides and then make his account private. And I was incredibly curious. So I invited him onto the show. We're going to chat about this. We're going to talk through why he made the switch and talk about Bitcoin, Satoshi's vision. Welcome to the show, Kevin. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Naomi.
You're about to call me Naomi. Is that it's not my name. Is I can see the nerves are getting to you because you're preparing for all of the trolls that are gonna, like, you know, pounce on. As I said, like just before we started, I'm not sure that there is a good outcome for me, because I think that maximalists who watch this will just hate me for even mentioning that there's anything other than Bitcoin out there, and the BSV supporters will hate me because I'm not a huge fan of BSV, but I'm happy to chat about it, and I want to know what made you make the switch, Kevin, because I think that that's very interesting there. But welcome to the show, everyone. If you do have questions, feel free to send them on over through Bitbacker. I'm posting the link right now in the chat, so you can all have that. If you wanted to send, you know, Valentine's love through Bitbacker, I would not turn that away. Or if you wanted to send some hate in form of trolling, also happy to read whatever you send through Bitbacker. So just send that on through, and thanks to everyone who has been using that. It's very much appreciated. So let's start off, Kevin. Let's just talk about you in general, about how you got into Bitcoin at the very start and what attracted you, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. But so before I get into that, to speak on the whole, hater thing, is I want the audience to question themselves and ask them if hating and trying to shut people down is a sign of weakness or strength.
It's a great question. That's a great question.
If you're not afraid to speak your mind and to have open discourse with people you don't agree with, is that a sign of strength or weakness? So I'll plant that seed in the audience's mind before once again.
No, I think that's a great point. And just to speak to that, I do worry about how many conversations are shut down in this space. I try to talk about everything. There are a lot of things that people wish I wouldn't talk about because they just don't want it to be mentioned. They think, oh, if you give this a platform, then you're doing everyone a disservice. It's like, no, actually, if you give this a platform, people can actually talk about these concerns without allowing them to fester and grow into something they don't need to be. Let's just talk about them, have civil discourse. It is a thing we're capable of, and I very much encourage that on my channel. So anyway, let's talk about how you first got into this. Give people who may not be that familiar with you, I'm sure there aren't many of them, but just give people an overview of who you are.
Okay, so my background is in commercial banking. I worked at large consumer and commercial banks. I started out at Wells Fargo, which was one of the most valuable banks in the country at the time before they had their fake account scandal. Then I went on to work in commercial banking, focusing on funding technology startups, where we would partner with venture capitalists to provide debt to startups. So that's kind of my unique background that allows me to understand Bitcoin, because I had my foot in the finance and the tech world. I worked at a small bank in the San Francisco Bay Area called Bridge Bank. And then I went to a larger bank in Comerica Bank, where we partnered with the who's who's of venture capital firms and banked the who's who's of hot tech startups in Silicon Valley. And then I went on to start a new practice at a bank called City National Bank. And during that time it was 2013. And that's when Bitcoin kind of arose arrived on the scene, hitting $1,000 and everybody, getting everybody's attention, including myself. And then I was an analyst at the time in compliance, and I was on the ground floor, basically absorbing the onslaught of Bitcoin startups that were trying to get bank accounts, which was at the time very, very difficult to do because a lot of them, wanted to. The problem, the killer app at the time was to be an exchange that allowed you to transfer or convert fiat into Bitcoin or crypto. And in order to do that, you need all these licenses, and it was only a very few number of well-funded Bitcoin startups that were able to secure the licenses to get bank accounts. And I was kind of on the ground floor with that. Got very frustrated with how slow and how just kind of how much bureaucracy there was in getting a bank account, and it really didn't make sense for me. And also I held some Bitcoin because I come from like a libertarian background. I was a Ron Paul supporter, and I was kind of I was Speaking of that, I think a lot of what Ron Paul did in 2008, even though he knew he wasn't going to win the presidency, he got the message out. He woke people up.
Did anyone even know what the Fed was until he started the slogan "End the Fed"? Like, I think that most people still don't know what it is, but at least he got a core contingent of people on board with the message of this is what central banking does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, that was another question. So after the 2008 financial crisis, I was affected personally because I was trying to apply for university, and all the California public schools were impacted because the budgets were also being slashed, and I was impacted directly. And there was at a time where I was wondering if I was able to be able to go to college or not. And it forced me to question our entire financial system and the central banking system. And I realized that nobody really understands how it works. And there is a lot of asymmetric information advantage to that, to where you can't hold people accountable and you can't question the powers that be. And Ron Paul, brought up that question. What is money? What is good money? What is bad money? What is sound money? And that brought me down into a rabbit hole to question at a fundamental level what underpins this economy. It's money, and then what is money? And people said gold is real money, and I was gonna be a gold bug or whatnot. But the millennial in me said that like it's too analog. I don't think we're gonna go back there. If we had to go back there, then we're probably already screwed. So Bitcoin melded my two worlds together of like a anarchic kind of spontaneously formed social form of money that's divorced from government decree, and it's digital. It's built on like a native on the it's a internet native value protocol. So it checked my two boxes, and then I threw some money in there in I think like May of 2013, and then that was when the Cyprus bail-ins was getting talked about, and then from there, during Thanksgiving, it went with the 1,000. I was like sitting there at my desk, and I kind of like 10x'd my money or like whatever, and I got pulled down the rabbit hole. But to the point about Ron Paul asking people to question things, two things. So I think a lot of people have like Stockholm syndrome, where they felt like they're prisoners, and like there was that area where it was just like Bush, Clinton, and everybody's like, well, that's just the way the system is, and you have no power in the system. The people are too powerful, and you just try to get by. During the Ron Paul times, everybody was trying to make change, but I think people were hopeless because nothing was really working in the Occupy Wall Street stuff. It was all kind of very old-fashioned protester trying to work within the existing political paradigm. Whereas
it's
Bitcoin,
funny that it always reminds me of that Simpsons episode where you have like these two candidates.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're both like
worth of two
monsters
evils.
from outer space. Monsters, yeah. And they're like, someone's like, I'm going to vote for a third party, and then the two people were like you could do that, but you'll be throwing away your vote.
Yeah. Whereas it's kind of like the Matrix, right? So they basically they put you into a system to where you think you're free, and you act within that system, thinking that you're making a change in the world, but you're existing within the confines of the boundaries that the powers that be want you to be within. And then Bitcoin is totally outside of the system. It's kind of Buckminster Fuller, right? It's like, in order to change the world, you create a better system that we move to, and also there's like an exit versus a voice perspective there. So going back to Ron Paul,
Bitcoin was about like autonomy of money, and I mean, you became a staunch advocate. You like spread the word. It kind of became your mission to let people know about this. And why was it that important? Is it just because it was this way to get money out of the hands of state?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I'm not going to mince my words here, that the central banking inflationary paradigm is an advanced form of slavery.
Right.
So if you exchange your limited time for money, but that money is not limited in itself, and the time that you're exchanging is being devalued. So let's say 1 hour of your life is worth $100, and then you exchange it for $100, but then the money supply doubles. Then now that time that you gave up is only worth half an hour. So you're literally getting your life stolen from you. I mean, I think people in Argentina and Venezuela understand this very acutely, to where 30 years of, or 10 years or whatever of labor and time that they spent was stolen from them because the currency collapsed, and now they have to start all over again.
Right.
So no, I mean, and then Bitcoin is, of course, it's a system to where it's hard to inflate the money supply, and it gives people an option to have a choice and to exit and to hold and to force the existing system to compete with us.
Yeah. So let's talk about your Bitcoin journey in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And you started out, I mean, you're a staunch advocate of Bitcoin itself. And this was BTC, and you were very outspoken about that. And then somewhere along the line that shifted. So let's talk about why you liked like Bitcoin in particular, and then when that shift happened, like why it occurred.
Yeah, so I think the general consensus is that was a hardcore BTC maximalist.
I like the way you use the word consensus. Throw some puns there.
Yeah. No, these are themes that are universal to all aspects of life. So actually, when I started, I started in 2013 getting into Bitcoin, and I did okay there. But actually, I wasn't a hardcore BTC maximalist. I was still having an open mind. Like, people didn't really understand what worked or whatnot. Like, I remember talking with like Jesse Powell about like Ripple and how come is that a better system and whatnot. And then Ethereum came onto the scene, and I liked it. I liked the idea of permissionless fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounded interesting of having a decentralized computer, where the state or the history of computations is on an immutable distributed blockchain, and kind of breaking like all the data silos and all the big tech companies. So I actually invested in Ethereum in the crowd sale at 30 cents, and I made Bitcoin for that. I sold that during the DAO fork, and actually I made a lot of money on Steemit, kind of gaming the system, because I became very aware of what the incentives are. It's usually to do things to try to pump the coin. So I kind of played into that and I made money. But yeah, I had a very open mind, and I played with a lot of different cryptocurrencies. But I think my turn to BTC maximalism happened during the fork war, the B2X fork war. And it's
Yeah.
interesting. So I have this thing about like I'm not progressive or conservative. It depends on what the consensus is. If everybody's being conservative, I'll be progressive. If everybody's progressive, I'll be conservative. And I
You just
think
like to
that,
be different.
well, no, no, no. So I see it as a balancing mechanism, or like I'm a thermostat or something. That if I feel that, people are going all one way, then I'll be the balance
And so
to.
where was everyone going during the SegWit 2X
So
debate?
I think what was happening, like concurrent with that, was like the whole ICO mania there. So that was just like totally relative insanity, just like pure off the rails. Like this makes no sense. Just like progressive, postmodern like finance, where it's just like nothing made sense. And then Bitcoin is kind of like was the conservative, um, school, which is like it still made sense, and weren't trying to do like everything in the world. So I gravitated back to Bitcoin to bring sanity back to crypto. And then I had majority of my holdings in BTC. And then during the fork war, um, because I bought into the kind of the narrative that Bitcoin is just digital gold and only good for censorship resistance, and getting around capital controls, or getting around unjust laws regarding drug dealing or whatever. I believe that narrative, and believe that retail payment transactions weren't important. Um, I didn't bel I didn't believe cheap transactions were important, because I always
Why
thought.
didn't you believe that? Because that's always seemed like a strange thing.
Yeah, so I talked with another person in the BSV community, and what we've come to realize is that everybody has a limited perspective. Everybody sees, they have the saying that you don't see the world as it is, you see the world as you are. So same thing with Bitcoin. People don't see Bitcoin as it is, they see Bitcoin as they are. And basically everybody has their own agenda, their own politics, or their own utility that they see in Bitcoin. And then they think that's the truth. And then they try to impose their perspective onto Bitcoin. And then anybody that doesn't agree with them is stupid or a scammer.
Or
So
retroactively justify something like, well, this is how it sort of evolved and come to be, so let's love it exactly how it is, rather than think
yeah,
that it
but
should
the
be something
reality is
else.
that that's your truth. That's not everybody else's truth. So I think what I've come to discover is that I think the majority of the people in kind of the BTC digital gold camp are kind of Western or American, and a lot of them, don't have, like, e-commerce or businesses that deals with payments, um, or they're invested in like the hold and speculation meme.
Well, I did
That's
see
their
that sort of
business model.
divide, especially during the SegWit
Yeah.
2X, debate that was going on, where people were saying like, oh, well, inherently businesses are bad who want to use this. They're just trying to scam people and make something that just suits them so they can have more profit, etc.
Yeah.
Like there was this very anti-business sentiment that started to evolve, which really surprised me because, these are
We're supposed
people
to be
that are
libertarian,
creating
right?
so much. Well, I mean, these are people who are creating so much movement in the
Yeah.
ecosystem. They're the ones who are reaching out personally and saying, hey, will you accept Bitcoin? I will pay you in Bitcoin and give you extra if you do. They're the ones who are really helping with adoption. So to start to like slam that side of it and create this narrative like that the businesses were somehow bad was quite surprising to me.
Yeah. And saying big business is bad is actually a very leftist socialist view, right?
Yeah,
Do
yeah.
you, do you know do you, do you notice these hypocrisies?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's always been something I've had issue with, where people talk about big business as if it's bad. It's like, no, well, crony businesses are bad. Businesses that, you know, are in bed with governments, that are, you know, creating regulatory capture, doing all rent. Right? But you've grown your company, you've created enough value for the world that you've grown it to a large size. That's not an inherently bad thing. That's actually pretty good, and you know, well done.
So I actually got very deep, and what happened in BTC and Bitcoin in general, it showed me socialism and collectivism happening in real time. And it allowed me to understand the underlying reason why socialism and collectivism is a thing, and it exists in all parts of society, not just politics. It was happening in Bitcoin. But yeah, let me sum up the kind of like the two narratives of the two camps in the B2X war that I found. Was that, you know, you had the holders, the digital gold people, and the people that were benefiting off of speculation and custody, and, you know, that whole side of the industry, and also second layer solutions, right? So you want small blocks in order to incentivize second layer solutions. And then you had the other side, which was, you know, mainly businesses, a lot of payments businesses and whatnot, that, you know, saw Bitcoin as a payment technology. And it was interesting, you know, they're very kind of Western and American in the BTC side, but I found that a lot of people in the big block side were international people from around the world. So I think it was a blind spot to a lot of Western Bitcoiners that most people don't have a good banking and payments infrastructure or a good currency. So Bitcoin was actually a good way to engage in commerce in countries internationally where the banking system isn't as robust in the West.
That is something that I noticed as well.
Come again?
Oh, I was just saying that is something that I've noticed as well. Like when people are they can be very dismissive of like real world problems, I think. Like when you're talking about transaction fee and they're like, well, it's not high at all. You know, it's like 10 cents. That's not high. And you have to put yourself in the perspective of someone who isn't using the US dollar as their fiat currency. You know, look at the perspective of someone where 10 cents, you could buy them a meal. That exists
well, that's
in
like
the world.
It's an hour's wage. It's an hour's wage.
So there are lots of people where that is a huge deal, you know, and to be dismissive of that, I think, is not helpful. That's not Bitcoin saving the world. That's not, you know, Bitcoin coming in. That's an issue, I think. So let's talk about specifically. I mean, so I understand that rhetoric going from BTC, noticing some issues there. I personally, like, I'm most bullish about BTC if I'm being honest. But then I'm very open-minded. Like, I think that better technologies are being created every day and being developed every day. So I'm constantly keeping my eye open for something that, you know, maybe is better. Maybe we move to something else. And I just don't think we know right now. But then you changed over and you went BSV. And that was very surprising to me. So let's talk about that transition and what triggered it, because that seemed like a very sharp move there. And actually, before you do that, so I just want to announce a couple of people have sent through power chats. I got one from Craig Mason's Reasonable Conversation channel. He sent Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. That was his comment. Thank you, Craig, and for sending the power chat. And then Kieran sent a power chat, sent Bitcoin. So Craig sent Bitcoin Cash, Kieran sent Bitcoin, and he asks, how big is Kevin's blocks?
They're 100 megabytes right now.
That's how big. So Kieran, just so you know, size doesn't matter, all right? It's how you use those blocks. So thank you for sending the power chat. I really appreciate it.
I think size matters in blockchain. It does
matter. Can we get any more romantic on this Valentine's Day? Block sizes.
So I think people with small blocks will try to make the argument that size doesn't matter. It's how you use it, right? But I think they're compensating.
They're
Or so.
compensating, yeah.
Yeah.
They're driving around in their Lambos compensating. All right,
Yeah,
so
they're
thank you
compensating
for
for their
sending
small block size.
for their small block size.
Yeah,
So thank you for sending the power chats. Here is the link if you have any questions or want to send through a power chat. Much appreciated. But let's get back to that question, Kevin. So
yeah. I
BSV.
apologize. I go on I go off on tangents a lot. So let me get back to the subject matter. My transition from BTC to BSV. All right. So during the fork war, me being a Western, person that has a good, a good payment rails and in a good banking system, but doesn't trust the Fed, doesn't trust the dollar. I saw Bitcoin mainly as a store of value, right? Hedge, digital gold, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I was trying to protect my use case and my view and impose my view onto Bitcoin, and to disenfranchise everybody that didn't agree with my Western centric view. Okay, but and then also I gained a lot of notoriety with being kind of like an attack dog and like calling out everybody's like hypocrisy or calling out bad actors or whatever, and I rose to prominent. Nick Szabo and Adam Back and stuff were retweeting me, and yeah, I gained a lot of clout and power from like being very intolerant, and there's a kind of a bad incentive there. So yeah, that's kind of that was kind of my claim to fame. That's kind of when I came on the scene. However, after that, I had other people that reached out to me because I think they identified me as a pretty critical thinker, and like Daniel Krawitz, and there's another guy, he's completely anon. His name is Urban Arson, and he reaches out to me all the time, and he's been in here for a long time, and they kind of tell me at a deeper level what I should be thinking, and they 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 preach the have you heard of the hold all forks thesis?
Mm.
You haven't heard the hold all forks thesis?
Hold off all forks.
Yes. So don't sell your
So
forks. Hold them all.
Oh, okay.
Have you heard of that thesis?
Well, yeah, the idea that you just keep all of them and then
Yes.
is that you'll make more money eventually, or you'll hedge your bets?
So it's actually a kind of an efficient investment strategy where you use diversification and also you embrace competition. So basically, if you do not split your UTXOs, you just keep your your Bitcoin in cold storage, and you don't sell any forks, you have the same amount in every fork, and you have an equal stake in every fork. And with that, you are guaranteed to win. You cannot lose. It doesn't matter which fork wins. Eventually, one fork will rise and become the one Bitcoin. But if you don't choose one, then you're guaranteed to win. Whereas if you pick one and it's the wrong one, then there's a chance that that 10 years that you spent your life your blood and sweat and tears you spent in Bitcoin is going to be worth nothing.
But there are different coins that I would say, you know what, even if you make money from this, is like the whole ethos of it, or the like, I think it's shitty. There are certain things out there that I wouldn't want to hold, regardless of like the thing. Like I know that there are some XRP fans in my chat, and I always apologize when I hate on it. But like the whole ethos, like I know that I could have made a bunch of money with Ripple with XRP, but it's something I'm just not interested in.
So there's a difference between holding all altcoins and holding all Bitcoin forks.
Got it.
So basically, in Bitcoin forks,
you don't think that the Bitcoin fork could be a shitty thing as well? Like you could have.
No, they can. There are a lot of Bitcoin Gold, Bitcoin Private, all that stuff. There's a lot of shitty stuff, but the fact is that we're very in early days, and we really never know. But then the main point is that the UTXO set is mirrored on the new fork. So you don't have to do anything. You don't have to buy anything, and you are given the same balance of Bitcoins in the new fork as you have in the existing fork, right?
So you went a bit further than just holding BSV. Like you switched camps at this stage. So why so far into that camp? Like why are you now a believer?
No, well, to talk about the Bitcoin fork thing, it's very logical to where if you hold all forks, you see everything as an experiment, a parallel experiment. And we're running the experiment in the real world and getting data back in forms of the price signal. So, we had the small block experiment, let's say the medium block experiment was BCH, and then the very big block experiment in BSV. So that is what forced me to keep an open mind to these forks. Okay. All right. So then while I was holding the BCH fork, there was a lot of things happening in the BCH community that was like concerning me. First, there was like a bug that I think Corey Fields, who was a BTC dev, found, and then disclosed and helped them fix it. But after the fact, somebody in the a dev in the BCH camp found a bug in BTC, and then disclosed it. And yeah, it was kind of a cool system to where we were working on different information and we could see things that other people weren't seeing, as opposed to everybody having groupthink working on one fork. But then there was this. I noticed there was like this infighting going on in BCH between like Jihan Wu and Bitmain, and like Chris Pasia and like Dedelnix and Craig Wright and like Calvin Ayre, and like other people in that community. Do you remember that?
The Calvin, say that again.
So there was infighting happening between like Jihan, and like Calvin and like Craig Wright.
Yeah.
And so Roger and Jihan and like Calvin and Craig Wright, remember? There was they started unfollowing each other, and so I was looking at that, and I was wondering like what's going on here. And I always had an intuition that the BCH people were smarter than they led on to be, because most of them were billionaires. So Jihan Wu was a billionaire. I'm pretty sure Roger was, in that range. Calvin Ayre is a billionaire. Craig Wright, he's assumed to be a billionaire. So yeah, there are very capable people with a lot of resources, and I never discount that. So when I saw them fighting, I thought it was a trick, because I know the BCH people are kind of very savvy in like the art of war. Like the whole BCH launch happened out of nowhere, right? It came out of nowhere initially. Like Bitmain just launched it, right?
Well, it wasn't out of nowhere. It was after a long I mean, they basically knew that the agreement wasn't going to happen and that they were going to safeguard themselves. So they were coding that up regardless. And then when they knew that it was going to fall through, they just released it. Yeah,
but it was just like it just seemed like it was Bitmain that just like unilaterally did it, and everybody's like, oh, okay, this is great. We'll just go to this one now. And then the whole the Coinbase pump, when they listed it like out of surprise, without telling anybody.
Well, that's not true. But Coinbase, it took a while. I actually tweeted them a lot because I was one of those stupid people that was holding money in Coinbase at the time. And I went to get money out probably a week prior and then couldn't because everything was blocked. And I was like, oh, okay, well, there's that now. And then they weren't considering accepting it at all. There was no talk about supporting. And I tweeted at them, and I kind of started this mini campaign saying, hey, guys, why don't you do what you did for Ethereum, where you just at least like one time allow people to just withdraw their Bitcoin.
So the thing was that they always signaled that they would allow for withdrawals, but out of nowhere they allowed trading and buying. And then from there, there was that big BCH pump, remember? Where everybody was freaking out, like, where was this coming from?
The futures kind of came out of nowhere, and that's where I was like, okay, this is interesting, because you didn't see a reduction on the BTC price. You just saw the BCH price come out of nowhere, which is counterintuitive if you take into account, like, different market percentages, etc. So was there like you think a pump that came out of nowhere after that?
Yeah. So the point was that, like, I noticed like the BCH team or whatever, they were very big on misinformation and kind of like sneak attacks or whatever. So I thought that like maybe they were letting on that there was a conflict within the community to get the BTC community to let their guard down, because they were showing on Twitter that Jihan Wu like unfollowed Craig Wright, and then like Craig Wright is writing nasty emails to Roger Ver, and they're publishing this. It's like, why would you publicly let everybody know that there's dysfunction within your camp? That doesn't make any sense. So, so I was, keeping my eyes on it. But then I dug deeper because I heard that there was a potential for a chain split between BSV and BCH ABC. And initially I just wanted free Bitcoin fork coins. right? So I started putting more money into BCH so I can get the fork on the other side. That always kind of happens. It's an anticipation of a fork, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to get free coin or whatever. So again, putting more money forced me to pay attention more, and I came to find that it really was an internal conflict, and the community really was ready to split off. And I looked at it more, and basically the way I knew that it kind of wasn't a scam is I follow Daniel Krawitz, and he's like one of the experts on signaling theory, which is basically animals or human beings can signal their preferences, and based on the amount of resources that's involved in sending off a signal, you can ascertain whether this is a strong signal that can be listened to or not. And for example, one of the strong signals is Bitcoin mining, which is you're basically burning money.
Yeah.
To support a currency or an implementation of a currency that you support, and it's a very strong signal because there's very high cost to do that, and it's not very easy to fake. It's very easy to just write a couple of lines and launch an ERC20 token or whatever. That doesn't require a lot of energy or resource or capital to do. So I could not deny that signal. And then it forced me to pay attention even more to the debate. And I noticed that the BSV community was being very consistent and principled. Because going back to the B2X fork war, it was a battle of like consensus model ideology, which was the BTC side was like, full nodes matter. The users matter, the ecosystems matter, and miners are there just to serve the users. And then the BC or the B2X, the big block camp, said that no, miners are the one that matters, and it's their vote that's going to get the the protocol upgrade decision through, and you have to cater to their needs. And the small nodes and the users don't really matter much. And then during the whole BSV conflict, BSV was consistent in saying that we are letting the miners decide, and we are creating big blocks so we can have large amount of transaction volumes for small amount of fees in order to compensate and do what's in the best interest of miners. And then the BCH community, they went back and they adopted the BTC narrative that they were initially fighting against, that you can't have too much of a big blocks because full nodes matter, and they need to be able to verify download and verify the blockchain cheaply. So they were being hypocritical in going back on their initial argument during the initial fork war and adopting BTC's argument. And
so I have
totally
a question then, it makes sense, and I want to talk more about BSV, because I'm sure there are lots of other tech differences that I wanted to cover as well. But in terms of like hypocrisy and inconsistency and all of that, I have personally, as a libertarian as well, I have a huge issue with Craig Wright. A huge issue that almost, it precludes me from having involvement with BSV as long as he is basically the dictator of this system. And it does seem that he is really running the show in this. Like he's the thought leader in the community. He is making he has a lot of control, it seems, or a lot of sway. And I'm wondering about your thoughts about Craig, where you come down there. So let's just start with that.
Sure. So so first, three things. To your point about him having a lot of sway, people in the BSV community in the camp that I run with, we've come to the conclusion that decentralization is a meme, and also decentralization is almost similar to like equality for all, which is also very socialist. And we agree that hierarchies exist in nature; they naturally exist in nature.
But when you're talking about money supply, you're talking about a system that if you have a central focal point that has too much power, it's able to be leveraged to the detriment of people using the system, you know?
Okay. So then to the point about Craig controlling things, let me propose this analogy. I think Craig is more like Ron Paul, where he's a conservative.
I have never associated as Ron Paul.
So follow my train of thought here.
All right, I'll try.
So Ron Paul, you know, he was trying to be a leader, right? He was trying to be at the top of the hierarchy to be a president. But what he was preaching was to de-emphasize the role of the leader and go back to our principles as of the Constitution. So he was a conservative constitutionalist. So he wanted power to reduce his power and return power to our founding document. Whereas there's a parallel there where Craig, he doesn't try to act like a leader. He actually tries to discourage people from thinking he's a leader by being like a jerk.
Oh, he's very successful in that.
Yes. But, you know, the whole Satoshi's Visions thing is basically that we are trying to be conservative and bring the community back to its founding principles, which is, you know, the white paper and the economic protocol that Bitcoin is, which is very simply one miner, one vote.
So let's go back to Craig Wright afterwards, because I want to follow this train of thought for a little bit. When you're talking about getting back to the white paper and all of this, I mean, I like
getting back to the Constitution.
It is, but we had a lot of amendments to the Constitution because people realized later on that the Constitution kind of didn't cut it. You kind of needed improvements. You needed to change something, clarify things.
But then there was also times were happening when, you know, we had a national emergency and we were, you know, being threatened by terrorists, and we needed to suspend, you know, things like, requiring a warrant before being, being searched or having your property seized. So people would, you know, use an emergency and pass things like the Patriot Act, which would directly contradict the Constitution. And then, you know, there's a slippery slope there to where you can.
But my point is more about, like, I mean, to get back to like the white paper and to say, well, this is supreme, let's just adhere to this because this was best. I mean, so when I interviewed Scott Stornetta, he was like, I really appreciated his point of view where he said, listen, cypherpunks have been trying for decades to figure this thing out, to figure out how to have an alternative money supply that couldn't be shut down, how to have a digital money. You know, they just spent so much time, and Satoshi got the ball over the net and he said it was good enough. And I loved that because he said, this is in no way taking away from the accomplishment. This was an incredible accomplishment, but at the same time, he just got the ball over the net, right? This is the first step. And to think that it came straight out of the gate as this perfect finished product, as, you know, illustrated in the white paper, is kind of crazy when you're seeing so much better tech being developed after the fact. You know, there's no privacy in Bitcoin. There are a lot of things which I'm sure like will be changed if we could go back and rewrite history and start it all again. So for me, like, I mean, do you subscribe to that idea that the white paper is sort of this supreme document that is perfect, and maybe, you know, we should just be doing what's exactly in the document and no more than that?
So let me, all right. So this is a lot to tackle. So I think the importance of the white paper is it's not about the software implementation. I think people in the BSV camp says that Bitcoin at a fundamental level, the breakthrough is on the economic side and the incentives side. And also, I think the main breakthrough of Bitcoin was to solve the Byzantine generals problem and using proof of work as the consensus mechanism to get everybody to agree. So I think that when we talk about the white papers, it's not necessarily, you know, the software and if it had bugs and it needed to be changed or not, but it is the thing that is fundamental to it regarding how much the software has changed is the economics behind it and the consensus protocol, which is basically the governance system of one miner or one CPU, one vote. that is the main thing that I think they're missing the forest for the trees. I think, just like our democracy is built, as a republic, we elect, leaders, and, there's our elected leaders, pass policies, and, there's an electoral college. That's the fundamental consensus algorithm or governance system of our democracy. And I think that one CPU, one vote is the fundamental aspect. So the consensus algorithm is the fundamental aspect underpinning Bitcoin. And I think what's happening is that people are moving away from the fundamental consensus protocol, which is one CPU, one vote, and saying, full nodes matter over minor rule. So whoever has more nodes is, the real Bitcoin, which is totally made up. And then you see the BCH community. There was this thing that happened where they were afraid that, Craig and Calvin's miners were going to attack and reorganize the network or whatever. And then Amaury Sachet, the lead developer, he implemented this thing called rolling checkpoints, like where it's actually like, every 10 blocks, they would add a checkpoint.
So was that something that you took issue with?
Yes.
So I know that there was that really divided.
So basically, they were saying that, regardless of, proof of work or whatever, the blockchain that we decide is the real Bitcoin, that the developers have decided is the real Bitcoin, is the real Bitcoin.
I understand why there were issues with that. I had issues with that as well. Yeah. I understand where they came from, though, because you literally had someone on the other side. You had Craig saying, we are going to attack you into oblivion. So this was a way of them safeguarding. So I disagree with the move, but I definitely understand why they did it.
Yeah. So again, I need to reiterate that the mental model, the analogy that you need to do to look at Bitcoin and blockchains is you compare it to a country. You don't compare it to a company. Okay? So the voting protocol is very important in how that's done. So saying that, our blockchain is under attack, and then now you need to give power to a singular developer to protect you is turning him into a dictator and invalidating, the Constitution or the one CPU, one vote social agreement that everybody agrees upon in crypto, and also it's an economic agreement. So it's very similar to, let's say, Hugo Chavez or Maduro saying, oh, the evil capitalist colonists or the evil capitalist oil companies are coming to attack and rape and pillage our great nation. So then we need to suspend our constitution and our democracy and give power to, a socialist dictator in order to protect you. But what happens is that dictator never gives back power, and there's no way to depose that dictator because you've suspended and you've gotten rid of your voting mechanism. Your democracy mechanism
were a thing in Bitcoin in the past. This wasn't something that was first implemented by Bitcoin Cash.
Yes. So, they're saying that, Satoshi did it, in the beginning to kind of, protect Bitcoin or to make it, to keep it alive in the early days. But
Are we not still in early days?
Yes. I think that was a pragmatic decision, kind of similar to, the, Constitution not affording, rights to, black slaves or whatnot to kind of get it going. But I think we've gone past that point, and they basically use that to violate the minor voting consensus mechanism, to completely invalidate it. And it's very similar to, Vitalik Buterin, everybody getting into Ethereum and everybody agreeing to the social agreement that code is law, or the economic law that code is law. And then the minute that they feel that they're going to be disenfranchised or they're going to lose power, then they vilify the attacker and say that I am going to save the protocol, and we're going to skip the whole consensus process, and we're going to implement chains unilaterally, and then everybody follows them.
Yeah. No,
So
I happen to agree with you. I didn't like the
yeah,
checkpoints either. I thought that
yeah,
was crazy.
yeah.
I'd
So
love
where
to do an episode about that, maybe with someone from
yeah,
the BCH side.
yeah.
They're just
To
for
where the
this.
BSV community was very principled in that, like, we want the hash war, or we want this to play out, right?
Right.
They were very principled in that.
I want to take this moment. So I got some more power chats in. So I want to give a shout out to those people. So Kieran sent another comment there, Kevin. Everything. Never underestimate the power of the Scouts Code. Okay, thank you, Kieran, for that. Then he said another one, and he said, every time YouTube asks me to support Naomi, send a super chat, he sends a power chat instead. So Bitbacker is the power chat alternative to the super chat. Instead of sending your money, 30% going to Google, you send it through Bitbacker, and you send crypto, which is a much better form of money, and 30% doesn't go to Google. So I appreciate you doing that, Kieran, and sending a super chat instead of a power chat. JR from Exciting World Cryptos. He has an awesome YouTube channel. You guys should check it out. He always has beautiful locations. He says, hi, Naomi from JR. This may be off topic to show. Figure say, thank you for all the amazing work you do. Always supportive of any decision you make. No objection from my side ever on any of your great content. You're amazing. Love you lots. Happy Valentine's Day. Cheers, JR. JR, you are awesome. You should be more discerning about my content. If I put out shitty stuff, just tell me. Just be like, I disagree. We'll have a conversation about that. But I appreciate your support. Kieran sent a test, a very generous test, and then he sent a comment saying test successful. Glad you confirmed that, Kieran. Also, huge thank you. You're amazing. Craig sent an anonymous power chat that says Craig Wright has admitted that he acts the way he does as essentially a test for people to discern the argument from the person making the argument. Would you agree with that, Kevin?
Yes.
I just think that he's just an ass. I mean, I want to. How do you feel about Craig? I'm just going to ask you, like, how do you feel about Craig?
Okay, so two things. Remember, don't trust, verify.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So if you are judging somebody based on their personality traits as opposed to the underlying arguments or proofs, you're contradicting yourself, because you shouldn't be trusting any leader. You should be verifying, what they're doing and what they're saying. And then second, do you kind of know the NPC meme, Orange Man Bad?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So the BSV community has a similar meme, and it's called Aussie Man Bad.
So I take issue with that. I have had very limited interaction with Craig Wright. He blocked me right off the bat because I dared to ask him for an interview, which he immediately, after, I was very polite. I'm a pretty polite person. I pride myself on trying to be as amicable as possible, and reached out, asked for an interview, and he insulted me right off the bat. He told me to get a life right off the bat. He just said all these horrendous things, and then he blocked me. So, for me, to jump on this whole meme saying like, oh, you're just jumping on the bandwagon, so he's bad. Like, no, he's kind of a jerk. What's more, he's a patent troll. And I really dislike that. That just turns me off any project that he's going to be associated with or decision-making in. Like, I don't trust someone who's going to use the rule of law to try to hurt people or to win his wars. If he can't win with hash power, he wants to turn to government to enforce things. Like, no, that's antithetical to Bitcoin. So, like, I mean, you kind of dodged my question, though, about Craig Wright. Like, how do you feel about Craig Wright?
I agree. When you get past all his antics, he actually blocked me as well.
Really?
Yeah, he blocked me as well.
Did he ever unblock you, or are you still blocked?
Yeah, he has unblocked me recently.
Okay.
But he blocked me for the initial when he came on the scene at BCH. So I was in the same boat as you. Yeah, long story short is that I got past, me having an investment in the fork war forced me to get past all the antics and all the character peculiarities and to actually listen to what he was saying. And I agreed with almost everything that he said. He called, ICOs securities. He called all altcoins, pretty much scams. And he thinks that the primary value of Bitcoin will be, utility and use as a currency as opposed to a speculative a speculative, investment. So,
And what do you
and
think about
also,
his?
he's very consistent in principles about, the consensus model of Bitcoin and how it works with, the miners, dictating a consensus. So I kind of agreed with you. But to address your concern about a lot of people don't like how statist he is, right?
I mean, it's very antithetical to.
Yeah. So, yeah, I wasn't a fan of, intellectual property rights. I think it's kind of like, regulatory capture, rent seeking or whatnot. But, maybe this is my investment talking, but I think there is actually a real debate there about property rights, right? So if somebody, kind of calls themselves Naomi Brockwell and creates a similar show to you like you and dresses up like you, is that fair for them to profit off of that?
Are you asking me directly? Because I'm very much opposed to IP. I've done a lot of episodes on that with Jeffrey Tucker, Gene Epstein, kind of debating things out as well.
Yeah,
I think that the reputation system works really well in a free market, and that sort of thing. Like, I'm not okay with it, but I also don't think that the government needs to come in and do anything to stop that. I think that the reputation system and other tools are much better and much more efficient.
So, yeah, I was really initially very turned off by Craig's government-friendly and statist stance. But, this may be my investment talking, but, I've done a lot of like growth personally. And, there's things in my personal life, where I lost a lot of friends because of kind of my hard line stance against, statism and government and stuff like that.
Heaven forbid you should be a fan of individual responsibility.
Yes. However, I was kind of forced to grow up and to accept the world for how it is. And just, from a scientific perspective, if you have a hypothesis that the world should be different, but the world is not that way, reality is not that way, the onus is on you to prove why, your view of how the world should be is the case, because, empirically the world is a certain way, and it is the way that it is for a reason. And I think with like all the ICO scams and whatnot, it kind of showed to me that, the law isn't just corrupt. There are reasons why certain laws were put into place, because maybe, not everybody is a high-minded, rational actor, and that's the real world. And maybe people who think in a libertarian way are very niche.
But I mean, I don't think it's a libertarian's right to ever look down on someone else and say, well, I know better and I have the right to make a decision for you. Or this elitist, this elitist view should make a decision for you. Right.
So, I mean, but then let's go back to libertarianism. Are you a fan of anarchism or libertarianism? Because libertarianism
they're not mutually exclusive.
For small, they're okay with governments as long as they're small and limited.
Well, that's a minarchist. You're talking about anarchist versus minarchist. I would say both of them come under the heading of libertarian.
Okay, so let's just focus on libertarianism. So let's make sure that we agree on the definitions. So when I hear libertarian, I hear small government, limited government.
Yeah, no, we don't agree there. So let's call them a minarchist then.
So the small government thesis to you is minarchist.
Right.
Okay. So I am going to disagree with you. And I think a limited government has a place in the world. And this is my reasoning. I've come to the conclusion that empirically, scientifically speaking, by observing the real world, that nation states that own nuclear weapons are the only two true anarchists and the true sovereigns in the world. If you live in the United States and you claim that you're an anarchist, but you benefit off of the U.S. nuclear arsenal or the aircraft carriers that keep ISIS or North Korea from slitting your throat or nuking your country, then you are not a real anarchist. You're not a real sovereign. The only way you become a real sovereign or an anarchist is you commandeer your own island and you arm
Well, that's,
yourself.
I mean, I think we're getting off topic, and I would disagree with you anyway, because there's a difference between saying what is an ideal state and I subscribe to this belief versus this is the way the world is currently. It's very difficult to extricate myself from current context, but that's a little off topic. So I do want to get back to Craig Wright.
So I don't think it's off topic because, your worldview is what determines your view of what is right or wrong. And I was in your corner. I was a big fan, or I was a big supporter of Defense Distributed, and I was very against, kind of the IP argument that the state made to kind of try to shut them down for, trafficking arms, which is when in reality they were just uploading blueprints for firearms.
I'm actually producing a piece about that at the moment, so everyone should stay tuned.
I was kind of I was in your camp in that regard.
I don't. Why'd you leave my camp? It's a great camp.
Well, no, it was just that I just saw kind of how ineffective it was to constantly be fighting for things, and I would rather have to be able to move the ball forward without trying to have everything my way.
So let's suggest that, because at the very start of this show, you were talking about how you kind of err towards the side of the thing, like to balance out what's happening, you err towards the most unpopular thing. And I appreciate that, like finding the balance. I mean, when you're talking about the way things are, I think that the balance, like the gravity that happens in society, is you always err towards certain people who want to accumulate as much power as possible. And that's just what happens. And they say that freedom needs to be fought anew every single generation. This isn't a state that we're just going to achieve and then it's like, great, we have freedom. This is a constant battle where we literally have to balance out from people who are trying to accumulate more power. So for you to now say that, well, I'm happy with how things are and why fight it, that for me is a concession saying, well, I think that people who want to take power from others and centralize power and give people like less freedom, that's okay. That's the status quo. We should accept it. Like, is that not what you're saying?
So it's all about context. So within the Bitcoin and crypto community, having a pro-state or a empirically, pro-state view is actually very contrarian. Would you agree?
Say that again. Having a pro-state view is contrarian?
Within the context of Bitcoin and crypto.
But Bitcoin is like this much, and within the context of incredibly status world. So on the whole, that balance of just kind of.
I was talking about it within the context of Bitcoin and crypto,
right? But which is the area
that I fraternize in, and that is a contrarian
But
stance.
at the same time, I mean, you're not that contrarian if the whole world is erring towards statism, and Bitcoin was meant to be the antidote of that. And now you're turning that into one of these statist vehicles. That for me is like, oh, well, why bother with Bitcoin? Why not just keep US dollar? Why not have Ripple?
Well, I think I'm adamant that it is contrarian within the Bitcoin sphere. And going back to my kind of Miniker's view is that I see Bitcoin as a tool to make governments more efficient and more transparent and to restrain their power. Okay. So let's say all the governments adopt Bitcoin, and they no longer can, obscure where they're spending money, giving money to, drug lords or terrorists. They are limited in using inflation as a tax, and they have to be very upfront and transparent about how much they're taxing the people. Right?
So would your idea be that if we can get government on side with Bitcoin, this could be a positive tool that could be used to kind of like pull apart some of that power? Is that the basic idea?
Yes. As opposed to having the revolutionary romantic idea that we're going to destroy the system and rise out of the ashes and whatnot.
It's not that revolutionary. It's more about just having an option, about having, say, well, we have this centralized option here. Now we have a choice. We could use that if we want. You can kind of vote with your feet, so to say. So to kind of swap that, I think the issue a lot of people have is that when you try to like meld those two and have this very political environment where, as you said, you're working within the system, you're not just trying to have it all your way, you have to compromise. You're sort of devaluing or diminishing the power that Bitcoin once had. You kind of get rid of one of our options in that sense.
So I would say that I'm not compromising, and if we can change the fundamental nature and the fundamental ability for the nature to engage in abuse, we would have won. And I went to the TAB conference in Atlanta. There was a lot of Bitcoiners. There were a lot of BTC people there that I see my friends, and there was a vigorous debate that was happening. And I came to this concession that we can exist peacefully. But
what are you talking?
We can coexist peacefully.
So my thing,
so my thing was that, you know, if the BTC community wants to be hardline ideological, where you have to verify everything, everybody has to verify everything, and we have to keep it super decentralized and expensive and not user friendly, then Bitcoin can be the PGP of crypto. Or they can be the PGP Bitcoin, and then BSV can be the Apple computer or the WhatsApp of Bitcoin and have a huge market cap and affect the lives of billions of people. Because yes, let's say WhatsApp is centralized, it's not perfect, but it does use encryption to provide people with some semblance of privacy. And to get to a deeper level, I mean, the theme of this day it's Valentine's Day. And we're going to lead with love and not hate and division.
This has been a very romantic talk so far.
No, it got kind of heated, but love works like that.
No, they got passionate, Kevin. There's a difference, and one must have passion on Valentine's Day.
Yeah. So the thing was that I was guilty of creating this toxic adversarial culture on Bitcoin and BTC, and then once I left, that negative energy that I gave out turned around on me. I created that. I'll take responsibility for that. And I think that
you put your Twitter account on private, and that was just kind of block all of that hatred that was coming.
So that was me to say that if you're not with me, you're against me, and if you're not with me during my time of need or my time of trial and tribulation, then I'm gonna leave you behind. It was very kind of a like the Old Testament thing that, if I have a big ego, and if you're gonna, not be supportive of me in my time of need, then I'm gonna cast you off forever. So basically, that kind of mindset, I think, hurt Bitcoin. And I mean, the reason why is I think people think that they're trying to do the right thing and they're trying to be heroic and courageous. And it's kind of like a victimhood mindset, right? So everybody doesn't trust the government, rightfully, and people feel that, hey, they have been abused by the government. So they take on this, this warrior, vigilante, a disposition. But then with that, they look at everybody as their enemy, and they try to attack everybody. It's like a pit bull that gets attacked, or
I think that we can find like a happy medium, can't we? We can still have values and principles that we want to fight for, that we believe, I'll be uncompromising on these values, but you don't have to go at loggerheads with people. You can still get your way. It's like the difference between going through a mountain and the stream that goes around a mountain, right? You still get where you're going, but it's just figuring out the right way to do it.
Yeah, so I think, BTC is kind of trying to, just try to fight the mountain, where I think BSV is trying to, be efficient in how we go about it. And basically, kind of like my fundamental thing is this: I think the Ethereum community, I don't agree with their economics or their technological implementation at all, but I think from a community standpoint, where they wanted to help everybody and they wanted to be inclusive and not make it about political ideology, I think that was positive. And on my Twitter, I told you I'm a human maximalist. Like, at the end of the day, I am a supporter, and I fight for the peace and prosperity of all humankind. And to be honest, people that work in the government are people too, and they want to provide for their families, and they want to try to do the right thing. People in the SEC, whatever, They're all trying to do what the right thing. And my thing is that I want 7.5 billion people to benefit from Bitcoin. I don't want it closed off into just this niche ideological sphere. And also, like, I'm tired of having enemies, really. Like, being in Bitcoin, I feel like
it's hard to stop doing that, Kevin.
Yeah, well, the thing is that, I think that we bring it on a lot of ourselves. I started getting paranoid. I started being suspicious of people around me. I wore a bulletproof vest to the conference.
I heard about that. I heard that. There's something else. Timmy's song with his like.
Yeah. So I don't know. It was kind of a smaller social commentary. Yeah, but to be honest, there are 3D printed guns out there. There's a lot of overlap within that community, and also there have been like death threats during fork wars.
Oh my god!
So I mean, Jameson Lopp got swatted during the initial like B2X fork war, and he had to do like a show of force. We like fired a gun in video to kind of make people deter it. But yeah, so see, like what I'm saying is that we all think we're victims, and then we lash out at other people, and then I think we are creating more enemies for ourselves because, but in reality, we're becoming kind of the economic elites as Bitcoin has been rising in status and that. So you need to understand where you are in the hierarchy and adjust. And yes, and at a fundamental level, I think if libertarianism or Bitcoin is fundamentally true and good, then we should have no enemies, and we should be able to communicate the value proposition of 7 to 7.5 billion people why Bitcoin would make their lives better.
Although I wish that were the case, you're fighting against an entrenched system that has a lot to lose by giving up their power. So it's in essence, by helping these billions of people around the world, you're helping them because you're freeing them from a system that has hurt them a lot in the past. But the people running that existing system take it. I mean, already, like, you've seen the narrative really be coupled with these entrenched interests. I mean, we're going to have enemies no matter what. We just got to accept that. Like, there are people who do not want Bitcoin to fail, who do not want any cryptocurrency to fail, who will try to sow dissent. Like, there's the CIA document, I think it's from like the 60s, where they talk about how to destroy. No, it was during the Cold War, and they talk about how like destroy a company or something from within, and it's like all the different ways that you sow dissent and all of the like, and it's fascinating because you just see in the crypto community so many things like that happening. And I'm just wondering, like, to what extent are there external forces in here, propping a lot of this up? Like, how much of this vitriol is coming from people who are interested in crypto themselves, and how much of it has like been whispered in someone's ear or like planted there, or people adding fuel to the fire? Like, there's so much going on that I'm just like, wow, we have a long battle ahead of us.
I can't speak to other people's incentives or motives. I can only speak to mine. And I think a lot of the bad things that we see in society is just basically a mirror of how we are. So, for example, I was guilty of sowing, doubt and conflict and division within altcoins that I found competitive with Bitcoin. So,
I am guilty of too many cheesy music videos that are bad.
Well, you're probably better than me. But then the thing was that I would unconsciously engage in this behavior that, somebody like the CIA would do against other altcoins. So I honestly believe that Ethereum Classic was a proxy attack on Ethereum by small blocker Bitcoins. They kept it alive and used it as a proxy attack. So it's very similar to the United States or the CIA arming a rebel army to sow dissent and conflict within a nation and to destabilize it.
So I have another question before I do. I just want to read out this power chats. People have said more things. Talking about Craig Wright earlier. So someone said, anonymous said, yeah, Naomi, you're judging BSV by Craig's personality, which I agree, he's a jerk, instead of the technical merits, like too many BABers. That's I associate with I mean, it's just really hard for me to like something that has, according to his rhetoric, is this very pro-government, pro-patent trolling. Like, I mean, there are a lot of issues there, but I agree. It is a downfall. I should just be talking about the merits of that. And this is a debate about, well, this is a conversation about BSV, not about Craig in particular. Kieran says, oi, fork off, mate, with an 8. Aussie man, not bad. Thank you for your very intelligent, coherent thoughts there, Kieran. That was definitely helpful. Then Anonymous, I think it was Craig as well who sent this one, not Craig Wright, different Craig. He says, what people call Craig Wright statism is just living in the real world, that the government exists and has a monopoly on certain necessary functions of the society, and they'll probably will have for quite some time. And caps, I agree philosophically with them, tend to be religious zealots out of touch with reality. Yeah, well, I disagree with you there. Well, I agree that a lot of ANCAPs are, but I think, as we said, there's a difference between your vision for the world and what it should be, and understanding where we are now and how to live now. Like, I'm definitely an ANCAP. I definitely see that as the ideal situation for society. How we get from here to there is a longer debate. It's a much longer debate. But I really appreciate the power chats there. But so, Kevin, because we're running out of time here, I don't want to take up your whole afternoon, because I'm sure that you have like romantic candlelight dinners to go to, rather than this like candlelit, very romantic talk we have right now about Craig Wright, the love of our life. So has Craig like reached out to you personally? What like, was he part of your turning around? Did he do anything to try and convince you, or did he like reconnect with you after you'd already made the switch?
No, he didn't. He reconnected to me after the switch. So I think some people in the BSV community notified Craig of my change in stance, and then he unblocked me. Yeah, so he unblocked me, and it was interesting that the BSV community was actually very suspicious of me for a while.
Yeah, I can understand, because I mean, it was shocking to some people. They didn't, though. I mean, when it happened, it's funny. I mean, you're so well known in the space, and it's sort of when everyone was like, "Did you see what happened to Kevin? Like, how did that switch come around?" Because it just seemed so sudden. It seemed to come out of nowhere.
Yeah, so they thought maybe it was interesting. So the people at BSV initially thought like maybe I was a BTC plant and I was like a mole or something to get information or to raise dissent. You know, maybe I was an agent or whatever. But it's funny that the BTC community.
Answer me honestly, Kevin.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, glad we got that sorted.
Oh, wait, no. What was the question?
No, you already answered that. You can't take it back.
Okay.
I asked you if you were part of the CAA.
Oh, no.
Now we
actually, when I did the Wells Fargo thing, the FBI tried to visit me at my my residence that wasn't actually listed in. It wasn't even actually listed in like the public on my official address. And if I was there, I would have told them like, "Do you have a warrant? Otherwise, I'm not going to speak with you." But yeah, the FBI has like tried to reach out to me because I was at Standing Rock and I did the Wells Fargo thing. So I'm actually very like, I'm on their radar. So I'm actually kind of worried about that.
I think we all are. I mean, anyone.
I mean, everybody's in the FBI database if you're anybody prominent. But then second, that it was the BTC community that they're trying without proof to prove, or they're trying to insinuate that I got paid off or something like that.
They always do that. I mean, I didn't.
So basically, both groups, if you don't fit within their worldview, they will automatically default to like some conspiracy theory to validate their view when they have no proof. So it's interesting that happen on both sides. But yeah. But then after the fact, I have like exchanged messages with Craig, and he told me that I'm glad that you found your way here, and you're for a more principled and honest financial system. And I told Craig, it wasn't easy finding my way here, but thank you for setting up Bitcoin, which allowed people to give off honest signals about their real priorities and their real values through mining and burning money and whatnot, as opposed to just political appeals, or just talking a big game about certain stuff. We're running out of time, but let's lighten this up a little bit. And can I talk about the cool things? Oh no. I just want to talk about the cool things that I'm seeing. A lot of the cool products and innovations that I'm seeing being built in BSV.
Sure, go ahead. I mean, people know my beef with, like, I mean, before you do that, like, I just do want to address the whole, like, reclaiming lost coins part. How do you feel about that?
Yeah. So, are you talking about, the protocol reclaiming lost coins and like putting it back into circulation?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? So I think only the people that are talking about that are people in the BTC camp, and also there's a few people in the BTC camp that are talking about lifting the supply cap because there's
Yeah.
not enough on-chain transaction revenue to pay for the miners. And I'm like, who's the real Bitcoin maximalist here? Who are the real hard money advocates here?
Well, to
The
be
BT.
fair, I mean that the talk about like raising the cap, it was like a kind of offhand comment.
Sure.
Like that happened.
But then people were trying to like, shut it out and like, don't talk about it. And then there was like people like Peter talking, other people in the community. It was like, well, they kind of do have a point. If we get, to the reward happening or the block subsidy getting really low, then we might have to think about it. And they were going back into the paper and saying, Satoshi said that if there was a way to like programmatically allow for, predictable inflation or inflation that match, the goods and services in the economy, then I would have done it, but I couldn't figure out a way. So I just put in the hard cap. And yeah, so they're seriously considering it. But then the thing is that it's because they don't see the unintended consequences of messing with the economic protocol of Bitcoin, right? So that's my stances on that. But to things, so then there's an account, there's anonymous Bitcoin developer. He's called Unwriter, and I think what a lot of people aren't missing is that the limited block size limits people's imagination of what you can do on the chain. So Bitcoin is going for 100 megabytes, and they increased op return, which is, I believe, it's the function that allows you to embed arbitrary data into the blockchain, and they increased that to 100 megabytes. And then people started embedding pictures, website pages to the Bitcoin blockchain.
How do you feel about all of the like child pornography that's now being?
Well, that's kind of like a CIA type of attack, because that did happen to BTC as well, right? People try to embed links to child pornography and stuff like that. So that's kind of like a subversive attack. But to keep it positive, people are putting pictures, people are putting videos, people are embedding video games into the Bitcoin blockchain, and you can like hash your top score. And there's talks about independent film developers, embedding or uploading bypassing Netflix and uploading their movies to the Bitcoin BSV blockchain through like a sequence of transactions, and then encrypting it, and then selling the key to decrypt in order for them to own their own intellectual creation without using government. And you can attest to, I was the first one to create this piece of content, and I'm charging for it. And if you want to be ethical, you will pay me, the 50-cent fee or the $2 fee to watch my movie, as opposed to somebody that copied it and embedded it to the blockchain after you did, and provably showing that it's a copy and it's unethical. So I'm seeing Bitcoin as a distributed immutable data storage system, to where people are uploading their own creations onto the Bitcoin blockchain, and then charging for access, or proving that they're attesting to the provenance that they're the ones that own this and they're the creators of it. And if you just like take that to the logical conclusion, it like we see all information and all data and all websites and all services storing all their information on the blockchain, where everybody can permissionlessly write to it, permissionlessly access it. And Bitcoin is going to be like a fundamental protocol to the internet and the global economy. And it's mind-blowing. It's bigger than just like money and payments. It's like it's ownership, and it's a completely new kind of like economic paradigm. And lifting the constraints of the block size is allowing people to open their minds. It's like arbitrarily in socialist countries putting production quotas or whatever. people's imaginations about what they can create is very limited. Where if you have like an unbounded kind of free anarcho-capitalist society, people's minds are able to open and to dream up unlimited possibilities. And if you follow these accounts, I can show them to you later. It's very fascinating what's happening on the Bitcoin blockchain. It's unlike anything we've ever seen, because these arbitrary limits are being lifted and creativity is being released. So it's very cool. It's like everything that the Ethereum community were doing, but in a sustainable way.
I mean, it is. I never dismiss the innovation going on in the ecosystem in all kinds of different cryptocurrencies. So I'm glad to see that there is fun stuff happening there, very exciting stuff happening there. Again, like going back to the reclaiming coins, like that's something that I think that's kind of a bad idea. I think it's like, how do you also differentiate between someone who just wants to save and is just holding their money versus
no, you're seizing people's property.
Yeah, so
people's property, right?
you would agree that that's not a good thing with BSV?
No, it's not a good thing at all.
Okay.
And nobody's talking about that in BSV. Basically, in BSV, they're very adamant about having enough on-chain transaction revenue to compensate the miners to where we don't have to play those games of releasing more coin or seizing old coins and releasing them back into the.
So where did this rhetoric come from? Because I could have sworn that it was Craig Wright who was talking about this. Is this inaccurate? Has this actually just been something that
maybe we're talking about different
him?
things. Maybe we're talking about different things, but the reclaiming of coins thing, I saw a specific tweet and it was related to somebody in the BTC camp talking about that.
I think you cut out for a second there. Just say that one more time.
Oh, no. So the reclaiming coins, my recollection is that I saw it in a tweet from somebody in the BTC camp talking about that. I can link it to you.
Okay, well, I'll have to look into that more, because that is something that I know that I've chatted to Chris Pacier before in an interview that we brought up and kind of discussed, like, how's that going to work? And then there's this idea of like, well, does Satoshi's coins get on the market soon? If that sort of timeline of like, if a coin is basically like unclaimed coin, does that get like, put back into circulation? So I'll have to look back into that.
If it's coming from the BTC, BCH, I've never heard it from the BSV committee, but it is coming from that. Give me that, forward me that information, but I'm totally against it. You're seizing people's property. Right, for sure.
Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show, Kevin, and I'm sorry that you've been getting so much hatred. I definitely have been at the receiving end of a lot of hatred in crypto for a long time, because I enjoy discussing ideas with people, regardless of whether they're popular or not. So I've really enjoyed this conversation talking about BSV. I'm not on the BSV camp. I'm just going to admit that, but I do appreciate that you were able to like talk about what you like about it and your transition over. It's hard to, as you say, like to go against what is popular, because you just get attacked. And I think you tweeted recently just saying how like vitriolic the community can be as soon as and you mentioned on the show, as soon as you don't fit into someone's box, they just turn on you immediately. And that's something that I really dislike about the community, because there's so much that I love about the community. I have some of my best friends in this community, and I've made some amazing friends by doing this channel and chatting with people and learning their perspective. So it does make me sad to see us become segmented into these camps that are fighting with each other, when at the end of the day, across most of the coins out there, the aim is to take control away from centralized power, to empower individuals, give people back individual responsibility and control over their own finances. So if we're all still on board with that, then maybe we could find ways to work together to achieve that, rather than fighting or attacking each other. Sometimes maybe attacking is necessary. I don't know, if someone is posing a threat to something you believe in, obviously you're going to take it personally. You might want to shut that down, but I'm sure that there are more productive ways to do that than through attacking. But I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think what we're doing today, having open dialogue and the free market of ideas, is the right way to do it. And even though you remain unconvinced about a position, I consider you a friend, because I like just open discussion, and there's a non-zero possibility that there's something there's happening in the BCH camp that we're missing, and having this open
Absolutely.
dialogue is good for everybody.
Absolutely.
And I
And
think
anyone who is completely like 100% in one camp, like I don't believe in 100% ever. It doesn't make sense. You know, you don't ever see that. So anyone who's 100% of one mindset, I don't think that's healthy. I think you should always keep a little window open.
Most fascists are 100% about things. And I make this joke that a lot of anarchists are just frustrated out of power fascists, or aspiring fascists. But my fun is about dice, so I'll just leave it at this. For everybody watching, like, what happened in the past with, Ron Paul affecting the future. The decisions and the way that you conduct yourself today is going to have ramifications in the future of what this new world is going to look like. So you have to be very conscious of that, and you're going to have to decide, do we want a world that's more peaceful and collaborative and free tomorrow, or do you want to risk creating a society that's even more tribal and deceptive and totalitarian as the existing system that exists today? Because it's not a foregone conclusion that tomorrow will be better today. We see that a lot in Silicon Valley. They were very utopian, and there was a lot of abuses that are happening that in a way were kind of less free. So, regarding, personal attacks and subversive psychological warfare that other coins are doing against one another, you have to really ask yourself, when you engage in that behavior, do you want to perpetuate the same behaviors that are happening now in a different paradigm, or do you want to create a new world? And I've come to the conclusion that I want to create a better world, so I'm going to hold myself to a higher standard than what I see in crypto and the fiat world today.
Maybe if the two of us, even if we disagree on which cryptocurrency will achieve that, maybe we can still work together to try and achieve those aims, because they seem like pretty noble aims. I want to give a shout out to everyone who sent through a power chat on Bitbacker. It really helps me keep this channel going. Craig, who sent power chats through, Kieran, JR, the anonymous power chats. I really appreciate all of you and everyone who's been here in the chat. You guys are so awesome. And Kevin, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story here. I really, really appreciate that. And let's continue this conversation sometime.
No problem. Nothing but love, and happy Valentine's Day to you and everybody who's watching.
Yeah, happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Go and have a wonderful rest of your evening and eat chocolates and sit by fireplaces and whatever it is that Valentine's Day people do. And go and enjoy that. Lovely time with you all.
If you read the languages of love, everybody expresses love in different ways.
Absolutely. I accept it through Bitbacker. Just send as much love as you want, or chocolates. If you happen to know where I live, just send those over. Chocolates are always great. So see you guys later.
All right. Later, guys.
Bye.